So I am recording my homily for the 26th week of Ordinary Time. And you guessed it, today's my day off. And I'm down actually at Mount Rainier. So this is Mount Rainier, and it's not as cloudy as the last time I was trying to videotape up on a mountain. But it is definitely more windy. And so if you're hearing a lot of wind noise in the microphone, just pretend it's the Holy Spirit. All right. And then it won't be so annoying. So this week in the gospel, you have just a beautiful, beautiful story. And so it's the story of the rich man and Lazarus. And Lazarus is the poor man who's lying at his door for seemingly a very long time. And the rich man doesn't seem to care. He doesn't do anything for him. And in the end of the story, you have the rich man going to hell, which is, at least that seems clear that that's what's implied. And Lazarus, the poor man, goes to heaven. Now, it's like a story of justice, right? You know, Lazarus didn't have any consolation in this life, and so he gets it in the next. And again, it's that idea that I think God really loves the underdog. He loves the person who's not loved here, and therefore in heaven he gets to show them all the love that they should have received here. So it's a beautiful story. My first question is, why did the rich man go to hell, though? Because he doesn't do anything bad. He doesn't curse the poor man. He doesn't have him arrested. He doesn't ridicule him. In fact, he just ignores him. And I don't know if you've ever known what that feels like, just to be ignored. If you've ever been a minority in a particular group of people, people don't always say bad things, but they can ignore. And so you say, well, was that worthy of hell? I mean, that seems pretty extreme. The poor man goes to heaven, but he doesn't really do anything good. And so there's a challenge here for our understanding that in order to go to heaven, well, I just need to be good, right? I need to do good things. And as long as I just kind of mind my own business, keep my head low, and do good things, I'm on my path to heaven. Which I think the rich man easily could have thought that that's what he was doing in his life. He was just minding his own business, you know, he probably wasn't breaking the law, and he goes to hell. So there's a little challenge here for us in how we understand heaven and hell, but especially heaven. Last Lent, I gave an example. In fact, last week I gave the same example. I'm just going to review it for a second. And the idea is that, you know, Jesus Christ has created us as human beings. And so because he's the designer, he's the engineer. I know that's the engineer in me coming out. He's the one who engineered us. He designed us. He created us. He made us something beautiful. But he also made our hearts with a purpose. We're not just here on earth just to do whatever we want. And so our hearts are designed to hold only one type of love. This sounds familiar. You probably remember this, right? And so the first type of love that it's not designed to hold, it acts like a sieve, it lets it all out, is eros love. That's the love of the self. It's what I want. It's whether it's food or just comfort or you know, just good things for my family. Even my family in some ways becomes myself. It's like my little inner circle, and everything else is just, I just don't have time for it. I just don't care about it. And I got a bug bothering me. Actually, I got a spider. And so, where was I? Oh yeah. So that eros love, it goes into the heart, and so we try to fill our heart with selfish things, but it doesn't stay. The heart's not designed for that type of love. Now, those things are not always sinful, right? Don't think just because I'm not doing sinful things that I'm filling my heart. No, if I'm just thinking of myself, I'm already in that trap. Now, there are sinful things that we turn to, and that's especially when we're broken. When our heart has been empty long enough, when we've tried to put things in it and it's not holding any love, and it's been empty long enough, our heart becomes hardened, it becomes cold, and eventually we start looking towards sinful things to fill it, because, you know, they seem fun, they seem exciting, whatever it may be. And it just doesn't work. The escapes don't work. Drugs, alcohol, pornography, which is a huge problem right now. We put that into our heart, and then what happens is our heart becomes wounded. I mean, it actually becomes hurt. It becomes dysfunctional because we've put so many bad things in it. It's like putting sugar in your gas tank, right? You'll destroy your engine. Well, that's what happens to the heart. It becomes wounded. And then we have a whole new dynamic. So in Burlington, which is where one of the parishes that I serve in, the mall that's in Burlington was about a mile from St. Charles Parish, and that's where the shooting was. And so this very, very troubled young man went into the mall and shot and killed 5 people this last week. A horrible, horrible situation. And so what you have is you have a heart that's been empty, but it's been wounded deeply. And in his own desperation or whatever you want to call it, he has now wounded so many other people. And so one wounded heart begins to destroy other hearts. Just ask for prayers. At least we know one of the people who was killed is from our parish, and so prayers for their family. Can't even comprehend how wounded they are now. Not to mention the whole valley, the whole Skagit Valley. So our hearts, they must serve the correct purpose, or else we end up doing horrible things. We end up becoming selfish. We end up creating Lazaruses. Lazaruses don't just appear out of nowhere. They're created. They're created by people whose hearts are empty and who just do not fill their heart with what they're supposed to. And so that love that's supposed to fill the heart is agape love. Agape love. And that's love of the other. And so because the rich man had no love for the other, he was essentially damning himself to hell because he was never doing what he was meant to do. He was created to fill his heart with this agape love, which was love of his neighbor and love of God. And in reality, we're never going to love God if we don't love our neighbor. And if we don't love our neighbor, well, we'll never fully love God. I think that's right. I might have got that backward. Anyways, so it's a travesty. It's a disaster when one heart does not do what it's supposed to do, and that's to be filled with agape love. In our community, there's also something else going on. So we have, in one of our schools in the past, in the public school in Mount Vernon, there's an evangelical group that's offered Bible classes for little kids in the elementary school after school. It's like an after-school program. And so they had permission to rent the school property, and kids with permission slips, they could come to these little Bible studies. And I have to say, that's a great idea. I mean, if we can get permission to do that, what a great way for us to reach out even just to our own Catholic kids, if there's an opportunity for that. We would probably reach more kids than the faith formation programs do. But we don't do that. But some of the evangelicals have done that. So there's a group that's calling themselves Satanists who are demanding access into the elementary school to start a Satanist after-school group. Now, this is really upsetting a lot of parents, especially in our Hispanic community, because anytime you start talking about Satan, especially with the Hispanics, of a very, very deep sense of spirituality and the reality of good and evil, it really scares them. I think many of them are actually thinking about perhaps even taking their kids out of that school. And I wanted to say something about that. So the reality is this group is not Satanists. They're taking that name because it draws emotion and they get a lot of attention and they get a lot of press. If they just said they were atheists, nobody would really care. Because the schools right now, in some ways, are kind of that way, the public schools. But by saying they're atheists, they get everybody all riled up, which is exactly what they want, because they have one intention, they have one purpose in this. They want to make sure that Jesus Christ will never ever step foot in our public schools. That's the only thing that they're trying to do. They have no intention of starting a Satanist group. In reality, they claim to be atheists who believe only in reason, which is very ironic since we as Catholics would kind of back them up and say, well, we believe in reason too. You know, all reason is ordered to truth, which means it's ordered to God, because God is truth. And so there's an opportunity for dialogue there, but nonetheless, so in the midst of this, really what they're trying to do is get the parents to say, you cannot be in our school. So that way they can file lawsuits, they can do all these things and say, hey, the law says we can be here. So you choose, either we come in, or if we don't, neither can Jesus. And that's what they want. They do not want Jesus in the school. Now, my question here is, how is it possible? How is it possible that somebody can consider Jesus such a threat that they will do anything in their power to make sure he can never be mentioned in our schools? How can people see Jesus? They're seeing Jesus almost the same way we see this shooter in Burlington, as just this horrible, horrible threat, this horrible person who's done these horrible things. And that's how they see Jesus. How is that possible? And it's because we've allowed too many hearts to become wounded and empty. They do not see Jesus Christ as the means which fills their heart with his agape love. Now, that's your job. It's my job. That's why Jesus Christ gave us everything he gives us. That's why every single Sunday when we come to Mass, he desires to fill our hearts with his grace so that we can share that with others. Right? It's actually very simple. It's very simple, our mission. Take God's grace and to share it with others. Because right now our world is very wounded in so many ways. In so many ways. You know, the story of Lazarus and the rich man, if you read it really carefully, you'll realize that the story is actually the story of Jesus' crucifixion. If you really think about it, the story was geared to the Pharisees, wasn't it? He was talking to the Pharisees. And who was at his crucifixion? Who sent him to his crucifixion? It was the Pharisees. And so if you think about it, that Lazarus is Jesus. Lazarus is helpless. Even the dogs are free to come and lick his sores. He's so helpless. And you think of Jesus on the cross, right? You remember when Jesus was on the cross and that haunting phrase that he said from Psalm 22. I want you to read Psalm 22. And so when he quoted from it, he said, my God, why have you abandoned me? I mean, Lazarus easily could have said that any day of the week. And God wanted the rich man. He had every means of helping him, but he didn't, right? And so it's like Jesus on the cross. Nobody was going to help him. At the most, people could watch and weep. If you keep reading Psalm 22, the psalm is of a man in despair. It's of a man who's being beaten. It's of a man who's lying on the ground as the dogs are coming to him and these savage beasts are tearing into his body. And it says tears holes into his hands and his feet. And you can't help it. Is he talking about Lazarus or is he talking about Jesus? I mean, he's talking about both, right? And he's talking about a world of vacant hearts, empty hearts that need to be filled. And so he's laying out the path for us on that. Now Psalm 22 continues for a little bit longer and it gets more and more hopeful. That's the beauty of the psalm. And when Jesus was quoting from that, you know that there was a path that he was trying to lead us down as we were watching him die, and there was a path of hope, right? And so at the very end, this is what Jesus says. Well, this is from the psalm that he was quoting. This is what it says. And the poor will eat right? And think of Lazarus. All he needed was some food and shelter. But that's not going to come unless there's first some love in our hearts. So if there's some love in our hearts, then the food and the shelter will naturally come. The poor will eat and be satisfied. Now think of the vision of heaven of Lazarus. So Lazarus goes to heaven, and it describes heaven as the bosom of Abraham. And for us as Catholics, we're like, the what? You know, it's like, I don't get that. How is that heaven? But I think about, what do you think about when describe the bosom of Abraham, or the bosom of the heart of the Israelite people, right? Abraham was their heart. And so it's like an embrace. It's like a hug. So heaven is like a hug, you know, a big group hug. I know that might not sound very attractive to, especially to us as guys. But if you think about deep down what our deepest longings are for, it's for intimacy. It is for a hug from God. And so Lazarus is receiving that. His heart is being satiated. He's receiving a hug from God, which he should have received when he was here on earth through us. Okay? It goes on to say, those who seek the Lord will praise him, right? Because they're going to be in love. They're going to be in love with the Lord. And may your hearts live forever. Talking about heaven. May our hearts be full here on earth, and may they live forever in heaven. So we know what our purpose is here on earth. It's not complicated. Don't become frightened by it. There's so many little simple ways to show the grace of Jesus Christ and to fill all the empty hearts around us, the wounded hearts that can heal by God's grace. All right. It's a beautiful day here in front of Mount Rainier. I hope you're having a wonderful day. God bless.